You are not here by accident, but I want to begin today with something that most people spend their entire lives waiting for without admitting they are waiting. Someone to come. Not in the romantic sense, though often in that sense too. In the deeper sense. Someone who will finally see what you are capable of and create the conditions for it to emerge. Someone who will make the circumstances right at last. Someone who will give you permission to be fully yourself, to pursue what you actually want, to live the life that has been waiting somewhere just out of reach for as long as you can remember. Most people are waiting for this, not consciously. Consciously, they know that no one is coming. They know that they are responsible for their own lives, their own choices, their own happiness. They say the right things about self-determination and taking ownership and not waiting for external permission. And underneath the correct language, they are waiting. Waiting for the relationship that will make them feel worthy of love. Waiting for the success that will finally prove to their family, to themselves, to the vague tribunal of imagined observers that they are enough. Waiting for the circumstances to improve before they allow themselves to be genuinely happy. Waiting for something outside themselves to change before they give themselves permission to inhabit their lives with the full presence that those lives have always deserved. James Hillman spent his career pointing toward the specific form of cowardice that this waiting represents, and he named it without cruelty, but without softening it either. The refusal to take sacred responsibility for your own joy is not patience. It is not wisdom. It is not appropriate humility about the limits of individual agency. It is the deepest form of self-abandonment available to a human being, because no one is coming. And the life that is possible, the specific, irreducible, genuinely joyful life that is available to you, is only available from the inside. From the decision, made in full knowledge of its cost and its difficulty, to stop waiting and begin. Let me tell you about a moment in a consulting room. A man sat across from me, 51 years old, and said the sentence I have heard in one form or another from almost everyone who has ever done serious work on themselves. He said, "I have done everything right. I have worked hard. I have been responsible. I have raised my children. I have honored my commitments. I have done what was asked of me. And I am miserable. And I do not know when it became acceptable to be this miserable for this long, or when I decided that this was what my life was going to be." He paused, and then he said, very quietly, "I keep waiting for it to get better on its own, and I do not know what I am waiting for." That last sentence, "I do not know what I am waiting for," is the sentence that changes everything when it is spoken honestly, because embedded in that sentence is the recognition that the waiting has no object, that there is nothing coming, that the improvement that the waiting is oriented toward is not going to arrive from the direction in which the waiting is pointed. I asked him, "If you knew with absolute certainty that nothing was going to change unless you changed it, what would you change first?" He was quiet for a long time, and then he said something that I have not forgotten. He said, "I would give myself permission to want something, just that, permission to want something." For a 51-year-old man who had spent 3 decades being responsible, being useful, being what was needed, the most radical act available to him was to want something for himself, without apology, without waiting to see if the wanting was appropriate or convenient or approved by the tribunal of obligations he had been serving his entire adult life. That permission, the permission to want, and then the permission to move toward what you want without waiting for external authorization, is the beginning of what I am calling sacred responsibility for your own joy. Here is the idea at the center of everything that follows, and it requires a specific kind of honesty that most people find genuinely difficult. Joy is not a reward. It is not something you earn by fulfilling your obligations, by reaching your goals, by finally becoming the person you have been working toward. It is not waiting at the end of the path for the traveler who completes the journey correctly. Joy is a capacity. Specifically, it is the soul's capacity to be genuinely present to its own life, to inhabit the specific, particular, irreplaceable experience of being this person, in this body, at this moment, with full engagement rather than managed endurance. And like all capacities, it atrophies when it is not exercised. When joy is perpetually deferred, when it is made conditional on circumstances that have not yet arrived, on relationships that have not yet materialized, on achievements that have not yet been reached, the capacity for it diminishes. Not because the circumstances have failed to provide for it, but because the capacity itself has been abandoned. Hillman would say, "The soul does not wait," or rather, the soul can wait for a long time, patiently, in the way that living things wait through conditions that are not yet right for their flowering. But at a certain point, if the waiting is permanent, if the flourishing is never permitted, the soul does not simply go on waiting indefinitely. It turns toward something, not always something healthy, sometimes toward symptom, toward depression, toward the specific forms of suffering that are the soul's way of signaling that it has been waiting too long and will not wait indefinitely. The misery of the man in my consulting room was not the misery of bad circumstances. His circumstances were objectively fine. It was the misery of a soul that had been deferred for so long that it could no longer recognize the conditions required for its own joy. He did not need better circumstances. He needed the decision to stop waiting for them. Let me be specific about what this decision actually entails, because it is not the decision the culture of positive thinking imagines it is. It is not the decision to be happy regardless of circumstances. That is not sacred responsibility. That is dissociation, the refusal to feel the genuine weight of what is difficult, the performance of contentment over the actual experience of what is there. Sacred responsibility for your own joy is something more honest and more demanding than that. It is the decision to stop making your joy conditional on things you cannot control, on other people's behavior, on the resolution of long-standing difficulties, on the arrival of circumstances that may or may not come. It is the decision to ask, with genuine seriousness and genuine humility, what is available to me in this specific life, with these specific conditions, right now? Not the ideal version, not the version that would be available if things were different. What is genuinely available here, in this actual situation, to this actual person? Because there is always something available. Even in the most constrained circumstances, even in the most genuine suffering, there is always some small dimension of genuine choice, some direction in which genuine movement is possible, some quality of experience that is available to this person in this situation that they have been refusing out of the loyalty to their waiting to reach toward. And the accumulation of those small movements, the consistent choice, over time, to reach toward what is actually available rather than to defer in expectation of what is not yet present, is what builds the soul's capacity for genuine joy back from its atrophied condition. This is not achieved in a single decision. It is achieved through the daily practice of asking the question, what is genuinely available to me today? And then, this is the part that requires courage, actually reaching for it, without waiting for permission, without waiting for the circumstances to be more appropriate, without waiting for someone else to authorize the wanting. Now, let me speak about the specific ways this responsibility is avoided, because they are sophisticated, and they feel, from the inside, like wisdom. The most common is the postponement contract, the unconscious agreement with yourself that joy is available, genuinely available, not hypothetically, but not yet. after the children are grown, after the relationship improves, after the career stabilizes, after the health issue is resolved, after you have earned it. The postponement contract feels responsible. It feels like appropriate prioritization. It feels like the mature adult understanding that some things must come before others. But the postponement contract almost never terminates. The conditions it specifies are almost never fully met, because the unconscious mind, which generated the contract in the first place, keeps moving the goalposts to ensure that the moment of genuine permission never quite arrives. Because genuinely taking responsibility for your own joy requires something that the part of you generating the postponement contract is afraid of. It requires the risk of disappointment, the possibility that you will actually reach for what you want, actually choose it, actually commit to it, actually build a life around it, and it will not produce the happiness you believed it would. That the wanting, fully pursued, will turn out to be insufficient. This risk is real, and it is the reason most people keep waiting. Because as long as the joy you desire remains in the future, as long as it is deferred and conditional and not yet pursued, it retains the quality of perfect possibility. It cannot disappoint because it has not been tested. The sacred responsibility for your own joy requires accepting this risk, requires the willingness to actually want, actually pursue, actually commit, and to discover, in the specific reality of that pursuit, what joy actually is and whether the thing you were waiting for was actually what you needed. Almost always, the discovering reveals something unexpected. The specific thing that was being waited for turns out to be a proxy for something more fundamental. And the more fundamental thing turns out to be available, not in the circumstance that was being waited for, but in the quality of engagement with the life that is already there. Not the ideal life, the actual life. This one, now. There will be people in your life, perhaps many people, who have organized their relationship with you around the fact of your waiting, who have benefited, consciously or not, from your perpetual deference of the question of your own joy, for whom your waiting was convenient, your needs secondary, your flourishing something to be addressed after the more pressing concerns have been managed. When you begin to take sacred responsibility for your own joy, when you stop deferring, stop conditioning, stop waiting for external permission, these relationships will change. Some of them will reveal themselves to have been organized entirely around your compliance and will not survive the change. Others will initially resist, and then, finding that you remain genuinely committed to what you have chosen, will adjust. None of this will be comfortable. Taking sacred responsibility for your own joy is one of the most genuinely disruptive acts available to a person who has spent years accommodating others in the hope that the accommodation would eventually be reciprocated. The accommodation was almost never going to be reciprocated, not because the people in your life are bad, because the waiting was a trap of your own making, and the only person who can spring it is you. Saying no to the waiting, to the postponement contract, to the conditional joy, to the deferred permission, is not selfish. It is the most honest act you can perform for yourself and for everyone in your life. Because the person who has genuinely taken responsibility for their own joy is not diminished by the needs of others. They have enough. They can give without depleting. They can love without requiring the love to complete them. The joy that comes from within, the capacity that is built through the daily practice of genuine engagement with the actual life that is available, is the only kind of joy that is robust enough to be genuinely shared. Set aside 1 hour today, your sacred hour. Bring the question that has been deferred the longest, not the question of your obligations. You know those. The question of your actual wanting. Ask yourself, what would I want? if I genuinely gave myself permission to want it. Not the wanting that has been pre-approved by the tribunal of my obligations and the expectations of others, the actual wanting, the one that has been waiting. And then ask, what is one small movement I can make today, not toward the ideal version, but toward the actual possibility, in the direction of that wanting? Not the whole journey. One movement, today. Write it, and then do it, without waiting for circumstances to improve, for others to approve, for the timing to be right. The timing is now. The circumstances are these. The permission is yours to give. Subscribe to this community, not because someone here will save you, but because you are already someone who has heard this and felt, somewhere in the place that knows things before the mind catches up, that the waiting was always within your power to end. No one is coming. The life that is possible, specifically, irreducibly, joyfully possible, is waiting on the other side of the decision to begin. That decision is yours. It was always yours. Make it today.